Hello and welcome to the REALink conversation series organized by the Lutheran Community Care Services, otherwise simply known as LCCS. Today is the second of a four-part special where we'll be delving into pressing issues here in Singapore. And joining me on the panel today is JCM trainer, coach, speaker, and a father of two, and Dolly and Trainer, a mental health activist who is pursuing her degree studies and working as a social youth worker with teens. And they're both here today to share in today's topic on family violence. Now, before we bring them into the conversation, the LCCS production team went out and spoke to some people here in Singapore, and they posed two important questions. I will only intervene in family violence if, I will not intervene in family violence because, and so let's hear the responses to what some people had to say to these two questions.
So, I will only intervene in family violence if I am at least close to one of the people in the family.
I will intervene in family violence if there is very obvious verbal and physical abuse.
I will only intervene in family violence if I know about it and that I'm in a position to influence it.
If I happen to see if the victim is a kid, that is when I feel that even though I might not have the necessary power, but I feel like I have the duty, the responsibility to intervene.
I have intervened some domestic family violence before, and that only happens when there is somebody else around, like for example my neighbor, not because I know Muay Thai, but because that I know it's not right, and of course there's a witness. If there's no witness, I wouldn't.
I'll only intervene in family violence if I see an immediate threat to someone in the family. I've seen a father raising his voice at children, but I did not intervene because there was no immediate threat.
I'll only intervene in family violence if I know that by helping them, I won't be compromising my own safety. So if I were to help them and it affect my own safety, then it might place them in a more dangerous situation.
I will not intervene in a family violence because it's in the family circle and it's more or less into the surroundings and the culture they are they're brought up and they're following something. So it is not our thing to impose my suggestion into the family.
I will not intervene in family violence because if there is someone else who is taking care of the family, a social worker or someone of power, I guess, I assume, then they will be able to take care of the matter in itself.
So usually I will not intervene because I really don't have the necessary power, but I can get the necessary power to intervene on my behalf.
I will not intervene in family violence if I know that both parents are logical and are willing to sit and mediate about the circumstances.
I will not intervene in family violence because I think when it comes to family, it's complicated. There's always more than meets the eye, and when we try to do things from an external point of view, we might actually be harming the family more than we're helping them.
I'll not intervene in family violence because it might be a personal matter in the family and it's harder for a stranger to barge into such situation to help them.
Well, certainly interesting set of views and perspectives on the topic, but I just want to draw our guests into the discussion. Maybe we'll kick off with you, Dolly. Your thoughts and any reactions to what you've heard so far?
Hi everybody, and thank you, Augustine. I feel that it's a very diverse range of responses and quite relate to the responses. I mean, I would also intervene if there was a threat to anyone in the family, and if it was friends or people living in the building and you can hear that there is violence, I would definitely check up to see if they need assistance or if there is something that cannot be resolved in the family, and then I would intervene.
So you would actually go and knock on the door and pay a visit to that neighbor?
Yes, I would, because from my own personal experiences, even when the family or the perpetrator is aware that somebody else is watching or they can hear the violence, and and someone is actually interested to help, that in itself can stop the violence or make them want to get help. So, yes.
We'll talk more about what you've just raised. Jay, I want to draw you into the discussion as well.
Well, anyway, it's interesting to have this diverse view. My personal take is that sometimes we do not really know how to intervene because every family has its quirks and idiosyncrasy. So sometimes you don't know whether when you're intervening, you're actually helping the family. Let me just give you an example. Take, for example, maybe you could witness maybe someone scolding the child very badly, etc. And what if you were to intervene and then the parent will say, now somebody is protecting you. Wait till later reach so you really get it. So for me, it's unless I really witnessed something really very threatening, I think there's a good chance I will intervene. Otherwise, I think not knowing how or making that judgment call, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging. Yeah.
Thank you for that. So I picked up a couple of key words from the videos that we saw earlier. If I'm close to them, if there is a physical hurt, if I can make a difference, if it involves children, let's take that group of perspectives and voices first. Again, Dolly, you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I believe that it comes down to the individual as well who is observing the event. Most people in our society would agree with Jay and would not know where to begin and how to intervene. And they are also afraid because they don't want to make the situation worse for the victim. But especially with the person I am, if I witness an emotional or physical abuse, even on a child, I will definitely check with the mother or the father or the caregiver. What is this? May I help? And there couldn't possibly be any reason that you would have to hit a child who is helpless and cannot protect himself.
Have you intervened in a situation that involved a child?
I have once, yes. The mother was really upset and distressed and hitting her child in public. And there was no one else around doing stopping or asking. So when I approached the mother, she immediately stopped the hitting and started to drag her child away. And I felt that I had to approach her and say, "Can I help you?" Because in my experience, when somebody is so upset and frustrated and angry that they have to resort to violence, there is definitely something that they are struggling with emotionally and mentally at a deeper level. So if we were to get help for the person performing the acts of violence, we are indirectly getting help for the victim, whether it's a child or an adult.
I also want to bring you in, Jay. So from the voices, if you're close to that family or that situation where you recognize some people, or you already start to witness physical hurt, and if you feel that intervening, but if I can make a difference, and then finally one of the things that struck me is involving children. Benoit, do you have any particular concerns of yourself?
Well, in fact, I just want to pick up on what you shared earlier, because some of the words I picked up. Family violence actually could be a pretty broad category because it could be involve not just children, but it could be maybe an aged parent abusing their own adult child as well, verbally or physically, not just parents onto a young child. In fact, it can also take the form of maybe a spouse, for example, abusing either physically or emotionally the partner, for example. So it's actually very, very difficult, like I say, to intervene. But the key thing is that I guess where I share with Dolly also, if somebody out there has been on the receiving end of family violence, it's always good to seek help. Maybe talk to a friend or maybe a trusted neighbor for this instance.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up this point about seeking help. So, I mean, for those of you who are joining us on this program, very often people do not take that first step and they find it so hard. Dolly, coming to you and to Jay. And by the way, when I introduced both our guests in our program today, I've been very brief. So you may be wondering, why are they participating willingly on this program? So maybe now would also be a good time to perhaps share a little bit more, whatever you're comfortable with, both of you. Start with you.
Well, I think each and every one of us that has been, brought up, there's always some form of abuse because our parents or our grandparents, and when they're frustrated, they can raise their voices, or sometimes they can unknowingly hurt their children, and then it becomes a part of our conditioning. And when we get into an adult relationship, and if the pattern repeat, we often think, well, it must be my fault. I must have done something wrong. And I believe that one reason why people don't get help is because they often live with the guilt and shame and blame themselves. However, the key thing for me was that when I started to realize that no matter what I do doesn't justify the violence and the abuse, I started to speak out. And the moment you start to speak out and get the perspective of either a therapist, a social worker, or even a trusted friend, they will be able to tell you that no behavior that you are doing justifies your partner or husband or parent hitting you.
So if I heard you right, very often those who are experiencing family violence begin by thinking it's something that I did myself or something that I'm doing wrong, and so this is why it's happening to me.
Well, most of the time, the perpetrator or the person hitting is blaming the victim and saying, you deserve this because of what you've done. So most people internalize and blame themselves. And the guilt then also leads to shame, especially in a culture like Singapore, an Asian collectivistic culture where we often are embarrassed to share. And there's a lot of stigma that, if I tell other people that I'm being abused, what it's going to look like on our family.
Thank you, Dolly. And Jay, you want to share a little bit about your own experience?
I mean, what I've actually witnessed throughout is that the physical violence, the violence may take actually different forms. It could be physical and it could be also emotional abuse. And it is not just, I think, a typical stereotype sometimes we see is that maybe a male or husband or a father hitting a child, but it could go beyond that. And I've seen in my aspects of life, etc., and peers around us that sometimes the emotional violence and the verbal threat are actually just as serious and just as bad.
So can we go a little bit deeper into that? I mean, I have come across case studies where there's huge emotional abuse. There's also silence. I mean, loneliness can be a very painful thing as well. Or couple living together, but at the end of the day, they go to two separate bedrooms and they don't share the room together. And then, of course, there's this whole element of if there are children in the family as well, what is going through their lives, what are they experiencing themselves. We wanted to.
I mean, definitely something along the way must have broken down. And I think before it escalates out of control into eventual violence, it's always good if both parties can actually strike a balance and see what are the things they can do to move forward. And like you say, especially if, let's say, children are involved. Yeah.
So you raised a very important point, and I want both of you to weigh in on this. How long does it take before someone realizes I have to do something? I mean, you mentioned it, right? You felt the need to speak up and to do something about it. But for some people, it goes on for a long time, right? And
Yes. Well, it went on for a long, long time for me as well, years. And there is a lot of aspects to it. It's not a very simple issue. There could be multiple reasons why someone would remain in a relationship despite the prolonged years of abuse. And just to touch on Jay's point, there is emotional abuse, which is also family violence. But when there is physical pain involved, there is always almost an emotional element to it. When you are physically hurting someone, you're also emotionally abusing them. Whereas when you're emotionally hurting someone without the physical, it's still painful, it's still violence. And the quiet sort of neglect that you were talking about, yes, it is also abuse which leads to trauma, because the abandonment that people experience from neglect in the loving relationship can really dig into the future to get much complicated and bigger.
well, for our viewers out there, and of course those who will probably come across this program anytime, you can always look up the links that are provided at the bottom of the program. But it's a very important point. And we'll be upfront with all of you. We won't be able to answer all the questions that we sort of did research on, but we certainly hope to visit some of the pressing concerns. And so if you have questions or comments, you can always put that in the social comments section of the program, because these programs are actually being produced for you so that you can possibly take the first step as well to talk to someone, right? But coming back to you, Jay, that first step is always hard. I mean, for some people, they live through this pain for years before something triggers. What would that be? What would that trigger be? Would it be a counselor?
I think personally, first of all, I think maybe within an Asian context, sometimes most people do not want to seek help, or they feel uncomfortable about talking to someone. But end day, I think it has to come to a realization. And many a times, this realization is because of a difficult event that has happened in their life, that they have reached the corner, that they have no other way, that, okay, maybe I should seek help. But what I urge, again, I think many in the audience that's listening is to just don't wait till that time, because sometimes it might be too late. Or for that matter, that is where the physical violence starts to manifesting. So for example, like I said, if you are the perpetrator of family violence, for example, it'd be good if you have calmed down a little bit and just dig deep and think, what have you done just now? Was it the right thing to do? And could it be been done better? And if there's a chance that you have this awareness to do something better, why not speak to someone, be it a counselor or professional help? Because I think end day, to seek help, the first of all is that someone has to first acknowledge. And it's only with acknowledgement there's awareness, and there comes change for a better outcome.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Is it really possible for someone who is inflicting pain and violence on someone else to change? Can this person change?
I mean, personally, I am an optimist. I'm sure at some point in time, we're all capable of turning the corner, so to speak. But the thing is that we all have different timeline that change takes place. So,
I mean, but for me, as a layperson, just listening to both of you, my initial instinct would be just to go and immediately evacuate and save that person, right? I mean, we just don't know how long this process is going to take for someone to change.
Well, everybody's experiences are different, but I have seen people reform. And sometimes, yes, I have heard of stories and I have seen people, but sometimes it can cost a relationship. And it's not necessary that somebody with anger management issues or with mental health issues who is performing acts of violence or hitting their spouse would continue to do so in another relationship. Sometimes it's the dynamics of two people's personality together that are triggering each other. In my own experience, it took me so many years because I was under the impression that it can change. And a lot of counseling and therapy work made me realize that only I can change in myself. I have the power to change my actions. And as a result, the response from my partner will change. However, when you've done the work and you find that the person in front is simply not able to change, then you have to do what's best for you. And it could look like me walking away, which it did.
I mean, forgive me if I use the wrong word. So it's sort of like a time out to be away, and that's. But there's also a need for professional help to come in, right? For professional counselors who are qualified, who should be able to do a much better job than just family members or the neighbors coming in.
Definitely, I believe that if somebody is fortunate enough to get help from professionals and counselors, they escalate the healing and the recovery process because they actually have a third party outside the relationship who's able to say, this is what's going on, and this is what you have to do if you would like to savor the relationship, to save it. And sometimes counselors would even, they do have the right to say that when you get better, you may realize this relationship actually is not good for you. You two people are not compatible and you can move on. Ultimately, there is no quick fix and there is no shortcut.
I mean, what I do want to say is that it is really true. Sometimes in the heat of the moment and anger of the moment, judgment gets clouded. So sometimes having somebody on the outside to see things from a different perspective and provide the tools necessary to actually reach a better outcome, whatever it may be, might be a better option, because otherwise that violence may continue endlessly, and we really do not want to see what's the worst possible outcome. Yeah.
So I just want to come in and pick up on that point. I see this in two ways. One is when the couple is in the early stages of their relationship and no children are involved. Mm-hmm. And the other is when there are children, even if it's just one child. Would both of you agree that children would change the whole dynamics and more needs to be done, or it's the same, it's equally important?
I think what you said, children is just one example of what we term as commitment. Of course, the deeper we go into a relationship, there's deeper commitment and there's more to think about. But nonetheless, I think it's very important as couples coming together to always evaluate to see what's the best outcome for everybody. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
Yes. That's my personal experience as well. I'm a single mother of a gorgeous boy, and we've never been happier. Doesn't matter if you're single or divorced, or the most important thing is that there's love around and you're happy. And yes, of course, having a child, especially from the Asian background, there is an added pressure of we have to keep it together. We have to make sure the family doesn't break apart. And there are many reasons for that. But the main reason is because we all know that kids end up paying a very big price if parents split. But sometimes when parents are together and kids are experiencing the violence, or they are witnessing two adults emotionally or physically abusing each other, the amount of trauma and negative impact on the child's development is tremendous. And that's when you have to weigh your benefits and your price to pay, like pros and cons. So what is better? Is it better if I stay, or is it better if I go? And when you keep trying and things just don't seem to work, then you have to do what's best for everyone in all the situations. And I'm very sure that, seeing the smile on my son's face, I know he's happy, he's got love from everywhere. It's not his fault. So for me to leave and to see that my son is actually happy and better off, long term, I have no idea, right? But at the end of the day, that's his journey, and he will find resilience and strength to move along. But parents quite often don't make that difficult decision because they worry about their kids, but they have to think about themselves first. In my opinion, if you don't look after yourself and love yourself, then you're not better off to look after your child anyway.
And you notice I kept looking down, and I was really pondering that one word got stuck in. Both of you brought it up in sort of different variations, the Asian setting. Why is that? I think all over the world, if someone hits someone else, it's wrong, right? Even if one partner insists on sexual intimacy when the other person says no, that's marital rape. And yet, why are we not openly discussing these things? I don't know whether even young people discuss these things in school, and there's some sort of education that's needed.
That's actually an extremely deep question that I have to say I have no immediate answer to what you've just shared, except that I think my take is that in a committed relationship, I think it's very important to try and explore all means to make it work. And it's just like what Dolly has shared, in the event that even if everybody put in all best effort and things doesn't work well, certain outcomes may have to consider. But at the very least, where I'm coming from is, I guess, is the ideally all parties must put in all effort to move forward for the benefit of joy and happiness. Call me an optimist, sorry.
You're entitled to your opinion, Don.
Just on the Asian context, it's because I lived 16 years in a Western society in Australia. I can really see the difference. But Singapore is coming along. It has improved. It has changed the way our society functions, but it's still got a long way to go. Why I say this is because it's very much, I shouldn't do something because it's going to hurt my parents or my children or my neighbors or my family. But we don't think what's most important for us. So it's not a very individualistic place. But love and affection and kindness has to start from within. So I believe that slowly we're moving towards that, but we worry too much about other people in our culture. We worry too much about family, but we never really look after our own needs first.
But I thought, being an urban, built-up environment where you live, 80 to 90% of the population live in public housing, and so you're in close proximity with your neighbors. All the more you will hear the voices, you hear the sounds, the
Yes.
need for intervention.
But unfortunately, people are so busy and occupied in their lives here. They may intervene in their own families, but they're all living in their own little hole, a little cave, and they're very lonely inside. There could still be a lot of work to be done on social work and support, and mental health and violence, and we're slowly shifting that way, but there is still a lot of work.
There's a lot been said about COVID and how during the first 2 years, people had to stay at home, and that sort of aggravated the situation in some families. But with that in the background, we are now into the third year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and like you said, Dolly, there are changes happening even in Singapore. There's a lot more discussion and awareness on a range of issues. So as we head towards the home stretch, closing thoughts and very importantly, important messages you want to leave with our viewers out there. Kick it off?
Well, I will come back to the point of self-love and self-kindness. Whether you are someone that is experiencing abuse or you are committing the abuse, stop, reflect, and think. We're all beings of love. We're all one. We come from the same source. And we have to work on our self-love and kindness. Would you want someone to do that to you? And would you do that to yourself? If you think you would, then get help. Seek help. Because love is all that we have, and we have to share it and support each other through this difficult, very difficult time.
In fact, I fully agree with Dolly just said, because it's important that right now we are more open about it, about mental wellness, etc. It's always important that you don't stifle too much inside, because the more you stifle, the more difficult it is, and eventually you're going to have a breakdown. And what happened? Everyone's in the family suffer. So be ready and be early to identify the signs, and do not be afraid to seek help. Even if it's not professional, start speaking to a friend. Because once you actually externalize how you are feeling, it does help you to move day by day, week by week. And if your friend really can't offer that resource to help you further, at least you have that comfort level to seek out professional advice. And I think living in urban Singapore, we all need that emotional outlet, so that actually our society as a whole can prosper. Yeah.
And in the reverse order, should we intervene when we witness domestic violence? Very brief, short answer.
I think we should we should not self-filter too much, and if it goes into our conscience that's important to intervene, we have to do it.
Completely agree. I wouldn't think about it so much from my mind, because when we think too much, the situation in front of us plays out. I would just listen to my heart and intervene.
All right. So on that note, thank you so much, Jay, Dolly, for sharing your thoughts and for being so candid with us. In the lead up to this program, and I did the research, I only have one parting message for all of you. If you're experiencing family violence right now, please talk to someone. Please reach out to someone and start that journey. And remember that you are never alone. On that note, I just want to say, please do also help LCCS's work, which is the Lutheran Community Care Service. They're doing work, so please continue to support LCCS in supporting the people to heal from family violence through your giving via the QR code that will appear in the program. On that note, thank you very much for staying with us, and do follow our program. We'll be coming up with another episode in the next part of our series.